the morning of leaving, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were all just dead. But they got us donuts, so that was okay. But I remember right when we hit the ground, well, let me back up. I'm sorry. Before that, we had made a goal to give a Book of Mormon to somebody, whether it was at a restaurant or it was somebody while we were waiting at the airport or wherever, because we were also at a hotel later that day. And everyone was so nervous. We're like, we don't know how to do this, but we've learned about it. And one sister and one elder had done it on our airplane. They had been sitting next to a non-member, and they were testifying. And anyways, it was a really cool experience for them and inspiring to the rest of us, because we're like, we can do this. But right when we hit the ground, it's super humid and it's so hot. I'm pretty sure it was like 103 that day. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this because it's so hot. But we met our mission president and his wife, and right when we met them, I felt like they were my parents. Like they were there for our best interest, and I felt like they already knew us. And we were just little babies. You know, we had no idea what we were in for. But at the same time, I did feel that this was going to be the greatest experience, and that it would be so challenging, but it would make me a better person. And we were all just so tired that day that they would give us trainings, and they were telling us protocol and the rules of the mission. And we were, like, half of everybody was falling asleep. But I don't know, it was just a really cool experience. I think the best part of the first day, though, was, or it was maybe the second day, was interviewing with our mission president and having him ask us really inspired questions of, like, what are your expectations and how are you going to be my best missionary? And he just had these really kind eyes that was like, you can do anything, and I'm here to support you in any way that I can. That was probably my favorite part of the first day. Then meeting my trainer, come to find out she's like the tallest girl in the mission, and I'm the shortest. I was so tiny. But something that our mission does for knowing who our trainer is and everything, they have a tradition where they have a big gathering in, I don't know if every mission does this, but they have a big gathering in the cultural hall. And we have the APs there and the zone leaders and the trainers, but not all of them, because sometimes it takes 3 or 4 hours to get from one place to the next place. So my trainer couldn't come because it was so far away. But they read off who they're going to be serving with and where, and then they do a huddle, and they call it a Hurrah for Israel. And that was really cool. That got me really excited too. But it took about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to my trainer after that. And it was pouring rain. And my trainer, I just knew that she was going to be exactly what I needed for those next couple transfers. She really was so tall. She was from Canada. And she was the sweetest, kindest sister I'd ever served with. She was essential to helping me build a stronger testimony and a stronger relationship with God. And that's definitely what I needed at the time. And she was really special to me. But she started me right off with talking to people. We had gone to a couple appointments, and she had me hand out a couple Book of Mormons that day, and it was really good. She was the best example of a diligent servant of God, for sure. So population overall, religious-wise, 95% everybody is Christian. Everybody believes in a God. So it was really easy to talk to people because everybody was like, yes, let's talk about Jesus. And everybody was so friendly and so kind, whether they were a member or a non-member. But my first area was Lincoln, Nebraska. So Omaha's the biggest city. Lincoln's the second biggest city, and then Grand Island, a little further out, is the third biggest city. Pretty sure. Anyways. But Lincoln, it was pretty ghetto. There were lots of poor people that lived there. And it was kind of surprising. A lot of them were Muslim or they came from Sudan. So a lot of the people that we had taught, we kind of had a language barrier. Some of them could speak Arabic and very little English. Some of them spoke Sudanese, and we couldn't find Book of Mormons for people that spoke Sudanese because they hadn't come out with one. They might have one now, I'm not sure. But they could read Arabic. So we got a lot of Arabic Book of Mormons and shared them with those that were Muslim or from Sudan. The attendance of the members, it was kind of surprising because a lot of the branches, it was easier to keep track of how active people were, but it was a lot harder to bring people to church sometimes because of how far away everybody was. In Lincoln, it was like 70% of people were active, I think. And it was pretty stagnant for a little bit. But we had a lot of success while I was there being trained and training. I have trained after my second transfer. And we had a lot of success with mostly less active families that had children that were of baptism age. And then, let's see, Fremont and Plattsmouth, they were harder for sure. A lot of the members were pretty hard-hearted and they weren't willing to do missionary work sometimes. But we had changed that as much as we could to inspire the spirit of missionary work. And the attendance maybe wasn't the best, but it was improving, and it probably has improved a lot more since then. And for Kearney, that was my last area. We were serving in a branch and a ward at the same time, so we were at church for about 6 hours. But we had success in both areas with the family ward, and it was a YSA ward, a young single adult ward. And for the young single adult ward, that was probably my favorite branch to serve in because everybody was so united and everybody was so willing to sacrifice for our members and for our investigators that we were working with. That was probably my favorite part about my mission, was to see these people that were so dedicated and were so willing to go on team-ups with us to go teach members, non-members, and less actives. Yeah, so our mission, like I had said before, is the third biggest mission in the United States. It covers South Dakota, a little bit of Missouri, I think, Iowa and Kansas, and the majority of Nebraska. So it's pretty big overall, going from one place to the next. It's about 5 hours to 6 hours traveling. Fun facts, I think Hershey was invented there, and Kool-Aid also. Let's see, so a big church history site there is the winter quarters. And as we know, that was a really big deal for the pioneers. It's a really cool place to go to. We were always encouraged to bring less actives and non-members to the visiting center because, I didn't know this, but it is consecrated much like unto a temple. And it's right next to the Omaha temple. And every time we brought a non-member there, they were baptized because they knew that these people that had believed in something that was so minuscule at the time and was such a big deal also. Nobody understood it, but yet they moved by faith. And that just blew everybody's mind. Like, they were so impressed that these people would travel miles and a long time to a place that they didn't know would be the place of Zion. So it was really cool for them and a really good experience for them. It did have a feeling of the temple, even though they couldn't go in the temple. And that's something that I appreciated about it. They only have one temple. It's technically in Florence, but it's pretty close to Omaha. And it's a very small temple. The next closest temple is probably St. Louis, and that's a couple hours away. But when the temple wasn't there in Florence, many members would travel days. They would make it a weekend trip just to get to St. Louis to do temple work for their family members. And it was cool to meet with members that were there during that time. I wish I had done better at being more personal and going out of my way for showing people that they're loved. I had done that more towards the end of my mission, but at the beginning of my mission, I wish that I had left notes for our non-members, or had done a small little tender mercy for them. Like, if I knew that they needed their dishes done, that I would have done them right away without asking. I had a bad habit of asking if I could do something for them, which isn't bad. But I remember there was one interview I had with my mission president, and I told him, I'm asking people if I can serve them. And he's like, don't do that. Stop it. He told me to not ask anymore and to just do it. And if that person genuinely says that I shouldn't be doing that for them, then I would respect their wishes. But that's something that I wish I had done better, was just doing, like Nephi, just do it. But for baptism, I wish that I had, I don't know, I feel like I did really well at inviting people to be baptized, but not on the first visit. That was something that was emphasized a lot, especially when I was a sister training leader. During our missionary leadership committee, we would talk about how missionaries are hesitating the first lesson to invite people to be baptized because either we're nervous, or we just don't feel like it's right, or that person may not be interested and we're afraid to ask them. So later on in my mission, I had done that, where I would invite them to be baptized first visit, whether it was a contact or whatever. And surprisingly, people would say yes. And so I think that people should not be afraid to invite somebody to do something that can change their life, especially baptism. Many people want to be clean, and they want to be free of sin, and they want to come closer to God. And that's what baptism does. That's the first step to coming closer to God and being more like our Savior. And I wish that I had testified more boldly that that is so important. And if we want to create a stronger relationship with Christ, that's how we should do it. Something that we kind of struggled with, and that missionaries should be patient with, is bishops and ward council. Ward council is super important, and I think it's important for missionaries to be prepared and to take notes. And but I had a bishop that I struggled with, and he was an older bishop. He had been a bishop for quite a few years, and he was ready to be done. So he was kind of feeling trunky, as they say, where they're just over it. They're just like, all right, whatever, there will be a new bishop and he'll take care of my mistakes. And that was really frustrating for me, because he wasn't willing to make missionary work a priority. And so later we had prayed to know how to work with him. And eventually miracles came from that because we were having a lens of understanding how he works and what is best for him and for the ward. But overall, I would say that it's important to understand how people work and be patient with how they work and not expect them to move at the same pace as a missionary, because that's all we do. That's all that missionaries do, is give 110% of their time to the Lord. And members, even if they have callings, they also have families and they have work and they have other things that seem more of a priority to them. So it's important to be patient. Kearney was my second favorite. It was like Lincoln, where everybody was just so happy and excited to meet with us, and we had really awesome members that would go out of their way to help us, or they would tell us about these missionary experiences, and I was like, I've never experienced this before. So it was fun to see members be excited, and when we would bring a whole family with us that were non-members, they would be so excited, and they would just flood to them and tell them, hey, we're here for you, whatever you need, we can give you guys rides, we can do this and this. So that was really cool. That was really the best part of Kearney. Being a sister training leader, though, during that time, it was hard to be in the area all the time because we would have to plan each week, because we only have 6 weeks per transfer, to meet with sisters, and we had a lot of sisters that we had to meet with. So it was hard to balance both, especially if sisters were struggling or if we had sisters that weren't working as much, so we would spend a day and a half in their area so that we could help them have more success. And I had wished that I could do more for the sisters, more than I could do for my area, which I wish I hadn't done that. I wish that I had balanced it better. But the sisters were important too. I don't know, it was hard to balance both. So if any missionary becomes a leader, I'm sure they'll be able to receive that revelation of what is best during that time of day or during that week. So Lincoln, I was there for about 7.5 months, 8 months. Cornhuskers. This is a big deal in Nebraska, and the stadium is in Lincoln. So tracting and making appointments with people during game day was the worst, absolute worst. There were moments where, so I was training at the time, and it was game day, and for some reason we forgot it was game day, and we usually try and plan around it, like we'll do weekly planning, because it takes about 3 hours to do weekly planning anyways. But we forgot to do it that day. So we went tracting instead, and there was someone watching the game, and I was like, why is nobody answering? Nobody is like, oh, it's game day. I just realized it, like after an hour of tracting, or 30 minutes. And this guy answers the door, and he has a bat in his hand. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna die. And my trainee was like, hi. She's so innocent and cute. She's like, we're missionaries, doing the whole, introduction. And he's like, I'm super not interested because I'm watching the game right now. I'm busy. And I was like, no worries. We'll come back another day, because he looked threatening and he is big. And but she just kept talking to him and trying to do the rebuttals and no, we're trying to share a message about Christ and how to improve your life. And he just puts his bat down and he's like, ladies, listen. I don't know if you know, but football's pretty important. And so he was trying to tell us how important football was, and I was like, all right, we're done. And we were there for about 15 minutes, him talking to us about how important the game is. And anyways, so we never had a threatening moment or an encounter with football during that time, but I was really scared. And my trainee was just like, this is the greatest. So yes, don't share the gospel during those couple hours of football. Also, so we covered the rich part of Lincoln and the really ghetto part of Lincoln. It was like a straight line. So we didn't have very wide boundaries. It was more just lengthwise. The ghetto part was probably the most success we had, although they did not stay very active. But there was one sister, she was from Sudan, and she spoke beautiful English. She knew English very well, but she could only read in Arabic. But the first day that we met her, it was only for a couple hours. Actually, no, it was only for 15 minutes, I think, that we met with her. We had invited her to come to church and invited her to be baptized, and she said yes to both. And we left, and we're like, she's probably not going to come. Like, let's be real here. Like, she doesn't really have a car, but we'll get someone to come get her. And anyways, because we had a lot of moments like that where it was like, that person's not going to come because they haven't shown up for the past couple months. Anyways, so she came to church the next day, and she was like, I love this church. I'm ready to be baptized. Teach me everything that you know. She stayed a faithful member for quite a while, but she enjoyed like her Muslim culture, and she missed it. And so it was really hard to show her that this is the true church of God and this is the restored church. But we had a lot of encounters like that. But Lincoln was probably the best. It was the most fun, I would say, just because everybody was so friendly and our members were so dedicated. And that's what made it worth it, was the members. The next area after that, I was called to be a sister training leader in Plattsmouth. I only stayed there for 2 transfers, and it was a very dramatic place. There were lots of sad, tragic things that happened while I was there. There were lots of members that were leaving, or a child had passed away. So it was really hard. It was a very gloomy place, but we did find success there. We did have members that were willing to help. Best ward councils I think I had were in Plattsmouth. Then after that we were shipped to Fremont, and it was much like Plattsmouth, where it was just hard. Members weren't willing to help in that area, and even non-members were pretty like, I'm not interested. No one was really willing to talk. So it was a really big difference from Lincoln to Fremont and Plattsmouth, where no one was willing to talk about Christ. It was a very touchy subject. And even members had a hard time meeting with us or having dinners with us, and having us share a message with them. Which was really frustrating because it's like, you guys, this is our purpose. And then after those areas, because I didn't spend very much time there, it was harder for me to really know like the activity for everybody. Fremont itself was bigger. It had bigger boundaries. Our area was about an hour each way. But we did a lot of service there, so we would have to plan, like, we'll be in this little town for this amount of time, and then we'll have to move back after dinner or something like that. So I had to plan a lot better during that time. There was this one day, so I think this was in Fremont. So people carry guns in Nebraska for sure, but I don't know if it's like Texas at all. But we went to this house by accident. Someone had written a note next to their name, like, don't go to this house. But we thought it was a different person. We picked the wrong address. So we go to this person's house. We knock on the door, and they have a window to the right, and they open the window, and the guy cocks his gun. We're like, crap. We're like, all right, bowing out. Never mind. That was probably the scariest. Like, I never encountered gunshots too often. Like in Lincoln, that happened a couple times, or they had something called a red light district where it has like prostitutes down the street. That was sometimes scary because things happen down that way, and we tried never to go down that way. So I never encountered anything too crazy, but that was one of the craziest things. Maybe the second craziest thing was we were teaching an unknown devil worshiper. And that was really scary because we had gone in for a lesson with her, and she was doing all kinds of crazy things, and the spirit was gone in 2 seconds. And she had a bunch of people with her, and there were candles, and they were talking about the devil, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And nothing happened where like they were doing a ritual, but the spirit was gone, and it was so uncomfy. And there was like a lightning storm happening outside, and like thunder, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I was training at the time, so I was like, I don't even know what just happened, so I'm sorry. So that was probably the next craziest thing that happened. I would never do that again. It was terrible. I don't even know how you can gauge that either. I didn't even know she was a devil worshiper when we met her. It was crazy. Nebraska's freezing cold. That is not an understatement. There would be days where it would be -40, and we would not be able to go outside because it was so cold it would take your breath away. So I would suggest for packing wise, thermal garments and lots of them. And leggings were my best friend. And lots of sisters would wear like 2 skirts and leggings and then sweatpants and boots. So layering is definitely a necessity in the wintertime. Staying hydrated and having a water bottle during the summer is important because it can get extra hot. The humidity makes it really cold and really hot. There's no happy medium ever. Like it's either one or the other. And you can, each mission is different. I know that some missions don't like people having backpacks. Our mission was okay with that. I don't know how the rule is, but I had a backpack because I had back problems, and we would be riding bikes all the time. And I would pack clothing for anything, because if it's hot, don't be deceived. It may be cold like an hour later. So I would pack like a jacket and boots if necessary. Sometimes you would have all 4 seasons in one day. Tornadoes are also a big thing in Nebraska and a little bit of South Dakota and Iowa. But if you're in Lincoln, it's not a big deal. A lot of people would get afraid of tornadoes coming in Lincoln, but never did. But on the outskirts of Lincoln, you should always be cautious. They usually give a siren, or if you see the sky turn green, you should probably go to someone's house. Let's see what else. Well-being wise, emotionally, it's really good to keep in contact with your sister training leaders. I didn't do that as much when I was training. I had a trainee that we kind of struggled together. We were not the same, and we weren't on the same levels of understanding or knowledge, and but we learned so much from each other, and I wish that I had talked to my sister training leaders a little bit more and had asked them for advice, or like what more I can do for her, and like just little things that I could have done for her. And my mission president too. I think sometimes we're afraid to talk to our mission president because they are really busy. They're always doing a lot of things, but we shouldn't be afraid to talk to them and their wives. I feel like that would have helped me a little bit better to be emotionally stable, because I feel like I was losing my mind as a trainee or a trainer. I didn't know what I was doing. Let's see, other advice. Something that I could have done better, and that I eventually got better at, was looking people in the face and showing them the joy that comes from the gospel through my face. I really loved sharing my testimony, and that's where I felt the joy every time. So I would try and testify as much as I could at any point in time, whether it was in a meeting with somebody, or if it was at a cashier. You know, I would just be like, hey, the gospel's great, and I would share a pass along card with them, and they would just laugh and be like, okay. But it brought me joy to share the gospel, and I would make it a game, and I would try and challenge myself and try and share as many pass along cards as I could. And it was always fun to call our zone leaders and be like, hey, we ran out. We need more. And they're like, what? Just gave you some yesterday. So I would say testify as much as you can and build that testimony. Make it a genuine testimony. I think there were some things that I didn't have a testimony of that I had to build on. So like tithing. As missionaries, you don't pay tithing, you pay fast offerings. But even that, I gained a testimony of the importance of paying fast offerings, and helping contribute to service all of the time as much as you can. But I think it's also good to be patient when you're building that testimony. Be patient if you don't know if Joseph Smith really is a true prophet of God. Build on it. Try and figure out, why is Joseph Smith a prophet of God? Why was he chosen? Why is he so important and such a big part of the restoration? Why is he important to me? And it'll come. As a missionary, it comes really quick, especially if you want it and you're submitting to the Lord and you're saying, I really do want this. If you're resistant, it's harder to be a missionary. It's harder to feel the power of God. It's harder to testify with true joy, and it's harder to love people. Rainstorms, they were insane, and they would get you soaked within 5 seconds. And yeah, it's crazy. And the oh my gosh, I'm struggling. I'm sorry. The roads would be like rivers. It was crazy, and it would happen really, really fast. So that happened not too often, but just during the summertime, 2 or 3 times. I think being with companions was the hardest part for me, because it's someone you don't know and you're living with them, and they have different habits and they have a different routine, and you're trying to coordinate with them as best as you can. But that was probably the hardest part for me, was trying to understand somebody that I was living with and loving them no matter what their habits are. So, yeah. Charity. I think the attributes of Christ were my favorite part of the Preach My Gospel. And I wanted to work on all of them, but charity was my biggest one. I knew that I could love anybody, and that through Christ, I was capable of loving everybody that I encountered. But I had a hard time with it at first because I struggled with individuality. I struggled with understanding why somebody would say that or why somebody would treat somebody else that way, even though they've known them forever, their family. And especially with my companions, I had to learn to love them unconditionally. And it took me months and months to really learn to love people. Once I got it, once I understood this is the only way I can gain charity, which is through prayer. I prayed for it every day and asked for me to see that person as He sees them. That was super powerful for me because I saw the beauty in that person. I saw that that person truly is a child of God. It sounds kind of cliche, charity itself, because we talk about it a lot. We talk about it in association with the atonement and with just love in general. But it really is the most powerful feeling I've ever felt. I felt so joyful and so energetic because I understood this is how to love people. And I truly do feel that love for somebody. And that person may or may not understand what I'm feeling for them. So that was really cool for me. That was a really good lesson. And I'm trying to apply it now with my own family members and with friends. I also learned to not pray for charity, patience, and humility all in one. I did that, and that was the worst decision I could have ever made because the Lord will give it to you once you ask for it. But on the other hand, it was also the best decision I had made because that day I had learned that it is okay to be imperfect and that it is okay to not understand. And it is okay to be afraid of some things. And I think we expect perfection, especially as missionaries. We expect that, okay, I need to be a good missionary all the time. But that's not necessarily true. You can be imperfect and also be a really good missionary. And I truly do feel that that's what helped me gain a stronger testimony. And that's what encouraged me to give Heavenly Father my all. There was a quote by it was actually from my fiance when he was on his mission. He had written that all that Heavenly Father expects of us is to give everything that we have, and in return we will receive everything. And I thought that was so beautiful because it's true. If we give Him everything, we will only receive that much more, but we won't expect it. We'll just give because that's what we want to do for others. It's true altruism. And I really appreciated learning those lessons, that we're capable of being like Christ. And we can do it by being imperfect and trying to be like Him. So there was someone that we were teaching. Her name was Jackie. And this was in Kearney, and she had been taught about 9 months before us, and they dropped her. And area books were always confusing because they would leave something out or put too much information that we wouldn't understand. So it was the 4th of July, and we were trying to look for people to teach, and there were members that were like, hey, there's this one girl named Jackie. They taught her a while ago. I don't know if she'd be interested. So on the 4th of July, we tried to contact her. We called her. She answered off of the 3rd ring. And I'm pretty sure she saved our number. And she's like, sisters? And we said, yeah. How'd you know? She's like, well, I still have you guys saved in my phone. I said, oh, that's great. She's like, yeah, I want to be taught. And we're like, shut up. Nobody does this. We were so excited. And she's like, how about tomorrow? Meet me at my apartment tomorrow. And we're like, oh my gosh, you are wonderful. Oh my, we were so excited. So we met with her. And we learned the story. She was 17 or 18, and in Nebraska, for someone to get baptized, they have to be 19 to independently be baptized. At the age of 18, they still need permission to be baptized. So originally when she was being taught, her father was okay with it. He hadn't said anything about being concerned about her being baptized. Come the day of her being baptized, the morning of, he denied her to get baptized. He didn't sign the paper that she was supposed to get signed to be baptized. And she was so mad. She was mad at God. She didn't understand why on earth God would do that to her, where she had the strongest desire to be a member. So she went off the deep end, did things that maybe she didn't feel good about, but she did them anyways. Never talked to the sisters. So 9 months later, we contact her, and she's ready. That first meeting, she was like, I don't really know about this still. Like, I'm still pretty mad at God for doing what he did, and I'm pretty mad that I wasn't able to fulfill something that I really wanted. And the Lord led us through this lesson because she was pretty upset still. And he taught us to teach her that God loves her so much. And we were all just like, the Spirit is here, and we were all bawling. And she's like, I know that what you're saying is right, and I know that God still loves me, and that I am his daughter, and that he cares about me. And maybe I wasn't ready back then, and maybe I'm ready now because of the experiences I've had, because now I might appreciate it more. So we were teaching her for about 2 months, and it was summertime, and there was one instance where she was kind of struggling getting to church. So we had a lesson about it's important to go to church and keep the Sabbath day holy, and to not go shopping on Sunday, and all of that basic stuff. So it was Sunday, and we were texting her, and we're like, hey, are you coming to church? She's like, yeah, but I'm going to tell you a story. This was fast and testimony meeting. She's like, I'm going to bear my testimony. It's going to happen. Her car broke down. No one could come get her. Her shoes broke. Someone had broken into her house. She walked 4 miles to church just so that she could bear her testimony. And she told us that story over the pulpit, and she's like, God is real. He helped me get to church today, and I probably should have called somebody to come get me, but I just felt like I needed to do this on my own. And she was an investigator at the time, and her being baptized was the most amazing day. Every baptism is pretty great, but she worked so hard for it. Like, she genuinely wanted to be baptized, and she genuinely wanted to be capable of making covenants and being clean, and it was just so beautiful for me. And it really changed my perspective of covenants and how important they are, and that we should always treat them with love and compassion, and cherish them, because they really are super important. And Jackie was a really big example to me of how important covenants are, and that we should always work for them, especially every Sunday when we renew them. I know that this mission that you'll be going to will change your life. I know that God lives, and through my mission, I felt him touch my heart in so many ways. I know that Joseph Smith is a prophet of God, and that you will come to appreciate all that he has done, especially in this mission, him giving his all to share the gospel with us so that we can build temples and so that we can find Zion. I know that the Lord truly does want you to be successful, and success isn't necessarily baptism. Success is feeling his love and giving that love to others. I really do know that if you submit to him and you give him 110% of all that you have, that when you come home, that you will know that you were meant to be there, and that you will always be a changed person because you took it as well as you could and as hard as you could. You worked and you did your best. So I truly know that your testimony will grow of prayer and of reading the scriptures and knowing that the gospel really is the Word of God and that it is exactly what we need. I know that the plan of salvation is real and that we will see our families again and that we can be together forever. I know that that the atonement did happen, and because of Christ's sacrifice for us, that we can come to be more like Him, and that we can fulfill all things through His power. I know that this is the true church of God on this earth today, and that as you come to know it throughout your mission, that you will feel the conviction and power, and that you will be bold enough to share that with everybody. I know that God is real, and that we will see Him again, and that we will be embraced in His arms when we see Him. And I share that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
It's an experience looking out the plane window and realizing that this is what you've been preparing for 19, 20 years. And so you're like wondering what you're going to be expected of you, what you hope to accomplish, but you really, I mean, it's new, it's fun, exciting, it's kind of scary, but my mission president was really good at it, making sure we all got a hug as we came off the plane, so that helped alleviate some uneasiness. My first day, they had senior missionaries take the younger missionaries out, go out, and our goal was to commit someone to be baptized that first day. So that was our goal. And me and my MTC companion, we went out, we got split up between two missionaries, and the other missionaries decided to have some fun. So they took me, pointed at some Hispanic guy and said, hey, go talk to him. And I sat down and we had a conversation. I knew enough Spanish that I could talk with this guy. It was an interesting conversation. Everything from Bob Marley to dealing drugs. And I was very confused, trying to teach him the gospel, Joseph Smith. I was so utterly confused. And after I was totally... when I finally got to the point where I had absolutely no idea what to say next, he showed me his missionary name tag and the camera that was recording me. So that was my first day, teaching a missionary about Joseph Smith. Nah, don't do that, that's not very nice. So, yeah, didn't get my baptismal commitment in there, but I tried. The missionary they put me with was he was the only Hispanic missionary in that entire area. He was a Spanish missionary. I was a Spanish missionary, like, oh, this is perfect. And it was their P-Day, so he was dressed in his regular clothes at the time. They're like, oh, this is perfect. we got an opportunity, let's take it. And I was unfortunately the victim. The Nebraska mission is, first of all, I had no idea that there was any Spanish-speaking people in there in the first place, but when I got my call to speak Spanish, I figured there was somebody there. They actually have entire towns that are majority Spanish-speaking, and in a lot of areas that just have a really high concentration of Hispanic people. Usually they're there to work at the meat factories or egg factories or agriculture. Usually when you're driving from one area to another, usually take from one town to the next takes like 30 minutes to an hour and a half. And you see corn and corn and corn and soybeans and corn and corn. So their crops aren't the view is not very diverse, but the people are, especially in the cities, are somewhat diverse. I remember when I was in Sioux City, which is actually not part of Nebraska, it's It's on the border between Iowa, South Dakota, and Nebraska. That city alone, I met, you've got Caucasian, Hispanic people who are refugees from different countries. You have plenty of Arabic-speaking people, lots of Native Americans, so from Sioux tribe and other tribes around the area live in that place. So it's a pretty culturally diverse town. And I'd imagine Omaha is the exact same way. The main church history in our mission that we spent a little bit of time delving into and usually talked about it like zone conferences was the winter quarters. That's in our mission. So the saints, while they were traveling west from to Utah, they stopped at winter quarters in Iowa and Nebraska and stayed there for a little while before they continued west to Utah. And a lot of people stayed there, and in fact enough church members stayed in winter quarters instead of going to Utah that more than half the people who live in that area are descendants from church members. A good number of them, whether they realize it or not. The mission covers most of Nebraska, parts of Iowa, and a little bit of South Dakota and Kansas. The church presence in Nebraska, it's definitely not as big as other places. The one temple in the area is the Omaha, Nebraska Winter Quarters Temple, and that's where the entire mission goes to, even though the mission covers the entire state of Nebraska. In fact, if you're in certain areas of the mission, you don't go to the temple. I was in one zone for 18 months, and that zone was outside the temple boundaries, so I did not go to the temple for the first 18 months of my mission. And then got transferred to Lincoln, Nebraska, and they are close enough to take temple trips every 3 months. There's only so many Spanish-speaking missionaries, and so when it comes time for us to transfer from one location to another, we got it down to a science where we're going to go and who we're going to be with, because there's only so many areas. There's one Spanish ward in the entire Nebraska-Omaha mission. That's in Omaha. And there's 3 branches that are currently run by, that are for Spanish-speaking members. In fact, my first area, I was assigned to a branch that had been organized just the year prior. It was Spanish-speaking. And that was in Sioux City. The other one is in Grand Island. And I can't remember where the third one is. There's lots of other places where they put missionaries who can speak Spanish, because you'll find enough people who speak Spanish in places like Storm Lake, Iowa, Denison, Iowa, Lincoln, Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska. There's actually a lot of places. So there's the Sioux City stake, covers a huge area. The Omaha stakes, I think there's just 1 or 2. There's the Omaha stake, and then there's just across the river in Iowa, you have the Council Bluff stake. Lincoln State covers Lincoln and all of the outlying areas. There's the Kearney stake, that's just west of Lincoln. And there might be 1 or 2 more, but that's about it. And the Spanish branch congregation in Sioux City, I don't know, got 60 people there, 70 people there on a good day. But that's while I was there, the fastest growing branch in the entire mission, so it could be much higher right now. Norfolk was a ward I served in. It's for mostly English, but there's 3 Spanish-speaking families there. They're trying to get a Spanish branch. That's their goal in the area. But we'd have over 100 people about there attend every Sunday. But of course, the list of the members who belong to that ward is probably like 3 or 4 times the number who actually attend. Whereas in the Spanish branches, because they're more recent, there's not as many people that we know of who are members. Usually you have 70 to 80% of the people who are on the ward list attend the the meetings. It's a nice place, great people. It was named after the Sioux Indian tribes, and there's plenty of Sioux Indians that live there, and usually in the less, not as higher class neighborhoods. That's usually where you'll find it is a bit racially divided, but not as much as like Omaha. I know some people who live in Sioux City will travel to where's that one place in Iowa? It's where Blue Bunny is. Their major factory for Blue Bunny. But most of the people that I've met and worked with in Sioux City worked at places like Tyson. There's a Tyson plant out there. Worked in the meat factory. Or agriculture around the city. Sioux City is one of the many places you can go where they claim Lewis and Clark's journey. It's like, hey, Lewis and Clark went right through here, come to our museum. So they got several museums on Lewis and Clark. Weather, it's always humid. I don't know why, but everywhere you go in Nebraska, it's always humid. Even though, Sioux City made sense. It's right on the Missouri River. But the other places in Nebraska, I don't know why, but it's always humid. And it's not like the highest for crime. I know it does happen there. There's a few areas that we definitely had to be careful around because we'd hear rumors about drug deals that happen in certain apartment complexes or just areas that were generally lower income areas. But we were lucky enough never to run into that ourselves. Our apartment was actually a 5-story castle, which used to be the high school in Sioux City. It was the high school for like a century, and then they made it into an apartment complex, and that's where we lived. And on one corner was the Catholic Church, and the other corner was a Pentecostal church, and not too far from that was a Baptist church and a Seventh-day Adventist church, and they were all as tall as our 5-story castle. So they got a pretty diverse religious representation there. They also have a Catholic high school and a Lutheran high school, in addition to the public schools. So Catholic and Lutheran are definitely the predominating religions there, but they just keep getting, I would imagine they'll just keep getting more diverse as far as religion demographics go. The majority of the people, like the Hispanic representation, will be from Mexico, Guatemala, and El Salvador, mostly. And there's enough of them that there's plenty of churches that just had Spanish services. Lots of Vietnamese there, actually. Lots of people who spoke Vietnamese. There's a couple churches that had Vietnamese services because there's enough Vietnamese. Usually when I tell people about where I'm from, Okinawa is usually the easiest place because that's where I graduated from high school. Okinawa has the highest concentration of American military bases personnel in the entire Pacific. That's where World War II happened, the Battle of Okinawa. That's where the Americans stayed, and so there's tons of both Americans, but of course the Japanese are there too, and it's a wonderful, wonderful place to live. Not only do they have the best scuba diving spots in the world, but they also have the nicest people you may ever meet. Everything good about seafood is there. There's plenty to do there. As far as fishing, not that I'm a fisherman myself, but if you do like that, that's also a great reason to even visit Okinawa. Okinawa is where the Japanese go for their vacations, because unlike mainland Japan, where you might get some snow, it gets pretty cold up there, Okinawa is more south, and so you won't ever see snow on the island of Okinawa. The Japanese do a very good job of learning English, because we're like half their economy. There's so many Americans there. And so you really don't need to learn Japanese to live in Okinawa. I didn't. I studied Spanish while I lived in Japan. Fun fact there. They love to eat food. It's really hard to have an appointment with a Hispanic without food being involved. You always have to accept food when you're going to their houses. They got mad at us a few times when the meal calendar got full and we didn't have any spots for lunch or dinner left. They got really mad at us because we couldn't come to their house. They love to party. They really do. More than Americans. They'll throw a party if they can find a reason to throw a party. Child's first birthday, they'll invite all their friends and they'll throw a party for their kids because their kid just turned 1. And it'll be a pretty big party too. Music and tres leches cake, and yeah, they like to party. They are late to everything. Whether it be a church activity or a church service or anything you can think of, they take pride in their identity as late teenos. But they expect you to be on time, usually. Well, they're usually very patient with you when it comes to learning Spanish. I mean, they're impressed that they're in your country and yet you're trying to learn their language. They're always very appreciative of that. They can be difficult to work with sometimes because they understand how to work really hard, especially when it comes to earning a paycheck, but not always do they understand the importance of working towards your spiritual well-being, keeping commitments when it's not related to a paycheck. Some Sioux City, Grand Island, and Omaha were, I think, your biggest ones that they put multiple sets of Spanish-speaking missionaries in. Then you have smaller towns like Madison, Nebraska. I served in a place called Crete, Nebraska. It's actually a college town, but they've got a meat factory there, farmland, so there's a large Hispanic population. Lincoln, Nebraska, also is a big city with a large Spanish-speaking population. There's even smaller towns. They're just too small and out of the way to really put missionaries in. Like Wakefield was a really small town. It's got an egg factory there, large numbers of Hispanics there, but it's pretty small, less than a little bit over 1,000 people.
What was the craziest food you had on your mission?
Definitely, what is that food called? It was given to us by a El Salvadorian lady, and basically it's cow feet or cow stomach. I loved it. I thought it tasted great. My companion died.
Awesome. What was a crazy or dangerous experience you had?
It's my first area. We knocked on the door and some Native Americans opened. You could smell the beer. And I, being new and in front of my trainer, said, when they let us come, I was like, yeah, sure. We went in. My trainers gave me a shake no. So we were in there and they stood by the door and drank their beers. They asked us questions about Joe Smith and other things. I'm surprised we got out of there. But, yeah, so we were held hostage for 30 minutes, asked random questions by people who spoke, half the time they didn't speak English, they spoke some Sioux language, but they let us out eventually.
What was a spiritual experience you had or a time you felt the Spirit strongly?
Lots of experiences. One, my first area, again, we were teaching a Guatemalan lady who was referred to us by a member, and she hardly spoke at all, gave us one-word answers anytime we asked her a question. So between the second and third lesson, we went by, knocked on her door to see if she was still okay with us coming by, and I have never seen somebody with a bigger smile on her face. She just beamed when she saw us and just talked and talked and talked and talked, and my mouth was wide open. And after we finished talking with her and she closed the door, I just looked at my companion and we were in shock that a woman had gone under such a big transformation, just a few days from not talking at all to just from the most sad and miserable person I've ever met to one of the happiest people I've ever met.
Any funny language mistakes that you can remember?
I never made any of those mistakes. Or at least I don't remember them. But my companions, oh sure, plenty of mistakes. There was one time, great guy, but he liked to joke with the little 3-year-olds of one of the members. He'd call them uvas, which is grapes. They'd call him uva back, and they call him a grape. Then he started shaking it up, calling them other things like fresa, strawberry. Then he called them a piña, a pineapple, and the members just burst out laughing. He's like, "Oh, I made a mistake." They're like, "Mother Jensen, that means gay." I was dying. So I called the little girls gay.
What was one of the greatest life lessons you learned on your mission?
I learned that not only do people have infinite potential, but that people are capable of changing to obtain that infinite potential.
What's a new skill or ability you gained as a missionary or developed?
The ability to like people, to want to talk to them. In the past, and even now, there's many times where just talking's a difficult thing to do, especially people you don't know or don't have an instant connection with. But everyone's got an interesting story, and when you keep that in mind, it's a lot easier to talk to people.
Most extreme weather you experienced on your mission?
I was really hoping that our town would get run over by a tornado. And we did have a tornado in my last area, but it almost hit us. We actually happened to be in Lincoln, Nebraska, while there was tornadoes running through the outskirts, and some of the outlying towns got hit pretty hard, but we were good. We just had to clean up the mess afterwards.
What was one of the hardest things that you went through or experienced on your mission?
There's a lot of things, plenty of things that are stressful, difficult. 90% of what you do as a missionary is just hard. There's that 10% really spiritual part where you're just happy and everything's just going great and people are progressing. 90% of it is just hard. One of the hard things for me was just really enjoying being a missionary, which may sound kind of weird, but just enjoying the experience altogether. It took me a while to realize that what I was doing was something I was really enjoying.
What's the best advice you could give to a pre-missionary getting ready to serve a mission?
Stay worthy. Set the goal of going on a mission. I mean, it's the decision that will shape your life. I mean, it's the decision you'll cherish most if you make it, and it's the decision you'll regret most if you don't make it. It's as simple as that.
What's the best advice you could give to a returned missionary who's just getting home?
Have some goals. Spend 2 years making goals and trying to achieve them. I mean, if you stop that now, then you'll also stop progressing. If you're not moving forward, you're falling back. So everything from scripture study goals to education goals, I mean, you need to have something that you want to accomplish and you need to keep working towards it. Prior mission, I had a million reasons, or I thought I had a million reasons that I was not ready to serve as a missionary. But in the end, the thing that kept driving me forward was knowing that I couldn't afford to not serve a mission. I knew that I needed God's help the rest of my life. And then that the least I could do was serve 2 years for Him. Despite all my weaknesses, many of which I still have, I believe that God was able to use me to do some good. I know that God really is in charge of missionary work. He really is the organizer of this whole experience in life. Even He really does love us. He really can change us to the person that we want to become. That's something that I've gained a very strong testimony of through missionary service, and I've gained even a love for doing missionary work. And the things that I really thought I could not do, I learned that I really could do with God's help. And because that I know that He really does care about us. and He loves us more than we realize.